Blog Talk Radio.
Namaste, folks. This is Nature of Reality Radio on December 17th, 2014. I'm your host, Andrew Fisher, broadcasting every Wednesday from the suburbs of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to expose the true and false nature of reality for what it is and what it isn't. Today on the show we have a very fascinating and very important individual, I feel. Important because of what he's trying to get disclosed. I have Stephen Bassett, or is it Bassett? I must plead ignorance on how to pronounce his last name. Stephen Bassett. He is the head of the Paradigm Research Group. He is a political activist and a leading advocate for ending the 67-year government-imposed truth embargo regarding an extraterrestrial presence engaging the human race. And by God, there is an extraterrestrial presence of many different species, variety, if you will, engaging the human race. He is the executive director of Paradigm Research Group, which recently produced a citizen hearing on disclosure, CHD, at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. Stephen has spoken to audiences around the world about the implications of formal disclosure of the extraterrestrial presence and has given over 1,200 radio and television interviews. Paradigm Research Group's advocacy work has been extensively covered by national and international media. Paradigm Research Group, PRG, will soon begin a Congressional Hearing Initiative seeking the first hearings on Capitol Hill regarding the ET issue since 1968. Steve did speak at the recent MUFON Symposium in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, which I was at. And I did see some of that interview where Stan Friedman, Richard Dolan, Linda Moulton Howe, and Stephen Bassett and a few others were talking to some people in government about ET disclosure and why it has to be done. Steve is not in the queue yet. I did add him as a contact on Skype not that long ago. I think he's away, though, here, but hopefully he'll call in. Let me just leave a message here saying, feel free to call into the show now. I will not let him on until 10 after the hour at the latest. I got to do news first. So first we are going to do the news, courtesy of Alex Jones and Company at InfoWars. First article, Russia expects a color revolution to follow the destruction of its economy. Putin was warned of a threat in November. A color revolution and the destruction of its economy. Well, the whole plan was to get the eastern part of the world, East Asia, and then move westward to Europe, collapse those economies before you collapse the American economy. So Russia naturally would have an economic collapse before America. And they back to color revolution. I must plead ignorance on that term. Don't have time to look at this article, but I can imagine Putin would be warned of a threat in November. He certainly wouldn't tell anybody, though. Your leaders don't tell you anything, do they? Full video proves cops targeting constitutionalists despite sheriff's claim. The sheriff's department faces massive backlash against shocking comments. Yes, that video where the sheriff's deputy, I believe it was saying that the military vehicles are going to be used because there are a lot of constitutionalists who own a lot of guns, and that sparked an outrage. That video went viral, and now a sheriff is saying publicly that InfoWars has spun this whole thing. They took it out of context and went up, but this sheriff is just trying to defend tyranny, apparently. Well, yeah, it's not apparently, it is. And we're going to come out on him for that. Next article, though, another positive gun story you won't see on the national media. A 14-year-old protects his grandmother by shooting an intruder dead. Yes, if it's a positive gun story where someone uses a gun to stop crooks or stop tyrants in government, even better, you will never see the mainstream media report on that because the powers that be don't want to stone guns. They want to destroy the Second Amendment, destroy our right to bear arms, because if Americans lose the Second Amendment right to bear arms, they lose their guns and then they lose everything. That's what Alex Collier, ET contactee, said, that his ET contacts told him to tell everybody that if we lose the Second Amendment, we lose everything. So higher up ETs watching over us are telling us that. That should say a lot, folks. Yeah, we don't want to lose our guns or we lose everything, and the tyrants want to take our guns. That's why they staged Sandy Hook. How appropriate. New documentary out, by the way. Definitely recommend. I believe it's called We Need to Talk About Sandy Hook. 2 hours, 40 minutes long, but it doesn't feel that long when you watch it. Interesting. It feels like it goes by a lot faster than that when you watch it. And they exposed Sandy Hook for the government stage fraud that it is, and that it did not happen, as evidenced by the fact that FBI reports say that nobody died in Newtown, Connecticut in December 2012. Nobody died there, FBI reports say, so you can say it, nobody died at Sandy Hook, because the government said it. Next article, Harvard professor, rape law classes no longer taught due to feminist outrage. Feminists claim rape classes traumatize students. Well, are we becoming a nation of wussies to the point where we can't teach classes because people are upset about and disturbed by what's going on in the classes? Well, maybe Pennsylvania Governor Ed Rendell was right when he said back in 2010, I believe it was, when an Eagles-Vikings NFL game was postponed because heavy snow caused public safety concerns, and Governor Ed Rendell said that was ridiculous. He was like, this is a sign of what's happening in this country. We're becoming a nation of wussies. The Chinese are kicking our butts and everything. If this game was in China, do you think they would have called the game off because of snow? No, they wouldn't. The Chinese would be marching through the snow to the stadium, and they'd be doing calculus on the way down to the stadium. He said something like that. And well, now we're becoming a nation of wussies because we're canceling rape law classes because of outrage, feminist outrage of all things. And are these feminists controlled by the New World Order, who wants to divide and conquer us and make us feminist and masculinist, for that matter, to divide us? Let's all try to get along, folks, and not let this stuff wussify us. Next article, lawsuit, thousands of babies kidnapped by county CPS. A lawyer uncovers an alarming trend as children are taken without warrants. Reptile aliens, cough, cough. Yep, I remember Alex Collier saying that one thing people tell him not to talk about, but he feels the need to talk about, and by God, I feel the need to talk about it. Children getting kidnapped. A lot of children who get kidnapped, the reason they go missing and never see the light of day and are never found is because, well, they'll never see the light of day. The people who kidnap them work in connections with the Illuminati bloodlines, the New World Order, the Illuminati, the families, and the people who control those families to a great extent are reptilian aliens who feed off the fear energy of people, especially the energy of children, and they get kidnapped and taken to the reptile aliens, and they probably control county CPSs to a great extent. I wish I were kidding, folks, but this is the truth. Although Ray Kusalanich, one of my previous guests, said there aren't many reptile aliens left on planet Earth, so hopefully the amount of missing children, I hope it's going down because of that. No more people to kidnap them and such. But I know it's a tough subject, folks, but this lawsuit, I hope it wins because we can't let something like this happen. Next article, help baby Olivia survive her first Christmas. Health authorities threatened to withdraw treatment despite Olivia not suffering from a terminal disease. I must plead ignorance on who this Olivia is, so I'm not really sure what this is all about, but they threatened to withdraw treatment and all that. Health authorities threatened to do that. Well, unless someone actually wants to die, then which wouldn't be all that bad, because when you die, you're in an infinite consciousness, a higher state of consciousness, which is better than anything you lived here in the third dimension. I mean, if you did bad things in that third dimension, you're going to have to, the karma is going to come back to bite you in your next life, so make sure you live a full life here, because when you die, if you live a full life, you'll live a full afterlife, so to speak, in some higher dimension of consciousness, and so there's nearly no shame in people wanting to die and all that, if that's where they want to go, but this whole thing about withdrawing treatment, it's still sick. If the person doesn't want to die and you threaten to withdraw treatment, and these are health authorities, oh, come on. Next article, school swaps 8-year-old blind child's walking cane with swim noodle as punishment. But the boy's mother says, why would you take the one thing that he's supposed to use all the time? That's his eyes, and he's blind, and he has a walking cane, and they take that from him and give him a swim noodle as punishment. I don't know what school this is. Don't have time to look into this, but the article, again, on Infowars.com, if anybody wants to harass the school because of the way they harass this child, this blind child, it's up to you. Next article, report, U.S. ground troops clash with Islamic State fighters. The battle allegedly occurred near a base where U.S. troops are stationed. Yes, I bet these Islamic State fighters don't have time to look in the article, see if this is the case, but I'm sure many of the there's no doubt that many of the Islamic State fighters are controlled by the U.S. government and the Israeli government and the Saudi Arabian government and the Turkish government, and they're all involved in some way too. And now it's sort of a civil war. The troops who are controlled by those governments are in a battle with the Islamic State fighters who are controlled by those governments. You don't want all hell breaking loose in the Middle East, folks. Definitely don't want that. So Oh, I have two people in the queue. I believe area code 202, if that is Stephen Bassett, I'll take you in a second, but area code 804, I'm not going to be taking calls until, well, just for you, stay on. If you want to take a call, I'll let you on at, well, make it 7:15, so it'll have to be 7:15, but you are first one up. I'll make sure of that, but I believe this is Stephen Bassett. Area code 202, is this Stephen Bassett?
Certainly is.
Yes. By the way, is it Bassett or Bassett?
It's like the dog, Bassett.
Bassett. Okay, thank you for clarifying that with me. So, well, it's great to have you on. I did see you at the MUFON Symposium in Cherry Hill, and I did watch that. Well, you showed some of it, but I did watch the whole thing about where they were doing that. Stan Freeman, Linda Moulton Howe, Richard Dolan, and those other folks were talking to people in the government about disclosure. And, well, I think we might as well start with that. I'll give you the floor on this whole citizen hearing on disclosure, and also the Facts on Washington site. You might want to tell people about that, what they can do, tweeting to the government and all to try to get disclosure to speed up the process. So why don't you tell us what that whole hearing on disclosure is all about, what Stanton, Linda, Richard, and all those other people that were speaking were doing, and let us in on that. You got the floor.
Okay. I'll try to give your audience a quick rundown. I'll take too long. PRG was able to get the White House to put a statement in writing for the first time in October 2011, and that statement was that there's no evidence at all for any extraterrestrial presence, or that the government has been hiding anything. That statement is still...
Actually, Steve, can I hold you on for just a moment? There seems like there's a lot of air blowing in the background, just to make sure people can hear what you're saying. What is that like? It sounds like air or wind blowing. Do you know what that is? Can you control that?
I think that's the mic too close to my mouth. Let me see if I can pull it away. Is that any better?
No, I can still hear it. Still hear like the wind sounds.
Oh, wait a minute. I think I know what it's picking up. No problem. Hang on. That should solve the problem. How's that?
It did get a little bit quieter, although I can still hear something, but your voice is a little clearer now. So, all right, you might as well pick up where you left off. Just try to articulate a little well so people can hear it. Won't be distracted by that.
Sure. We were able to get the White House to put its position in writing in October 2011. And that position is there is no extraterrestrial presence. There is no life outside the planet, no evidence for that matter, and no evidence that the government's actually hidden anything on this issue. That position is on the White House website right now. It's been up there for 3 years in the We the People petition section. And you can find it easily by going to the Disclosure Petition homepage, which is disclosurepetition.org. Disclosurepetition.org. Now, that was the first part of our strategy that we've been pursuing here. The second part was the citizen hearing on disclosure. The citizen hearing on disclosure was held in 2013, April 29, May 3. PRG brought in 42 witnesses from 10 countries, 18 researchers, and 24 military agency political witnesses. And they testified for 30 hours over 5 days in 20 sessions, presented written statements, read oral statements, right, before 6 former members of Congress in what would be a mock hearing held at the National Press Club main ballroom. We filmed the entire thing in high definition, and we also webcast it to the world. This was a significant event. It received accolades from all over the world, and it was a major step forward in what we're trying to accomplish here. So what we did in April, May of 2013 was essentially show, for anyone to care to look, a great deal of the evidence that the White House was officially on paper as saying doesn't exist at all. And this is important, because in order to get the press's attention, right, you need to show something that is clearly a serious issue, and it represents a government malfeasance or lying. And it's clear, obviously, that the position by the White House is not true, and the citizen hearing was essentially designed to show that. Now, the third phase of this strategy that we're pursuing is the Congressional Hearing Initiative. Now, that was launched on November 5. And what happened on November the 5th was that we shipped a full 30-hour record, video record, of the Citizen Hearing on Disclosure to every member of Congress. 538 10-DVD disc sets. 30 hours of testimony, organized as the thing unfolded chronological order, Monday through Friday, 20 sessions. At the same time, we launched a social media campaign. That campaign was designed to make sure that the people working in these congressional offices on the Hill, there were approximately 10,000 people that work on the Hill, so these offices, that they would know these DVDs were coming. They would be receiving messages that they need to look at this material and they need to speak with me about holding hearings next year for these and other witnesses ready to testify under oath to the events and evidence confirming the extraterrestrial presence. These are people with relatively high-ranking stations. So that initiative got underway on November the 5th. We've generated so far somewhere above 600,000 social media messages, hashtag disclosure, by Twitter and Facebook, messages into the House and Senate. Probably hit 1 million by the beginning of the next Congress, the 114th Congress. Also, there's an unknown number of emails that have been sent to these offices. Well, we don't have a count on that because there's no way to analyze it, but it's probably in the many thousands. And then, of course, a number of people have been calling their congressional offices, their members, their representative and 2 senators. All of this is designed to make sure that they are aware of and, in many cases, review this material, so when I come knocking on their doors, I can get meetings with the initial staff. That's going to start very soon. You start with the staff, and then you work up to the liaison to the committee, then you work up to the chief of staff, and then you work up to the member. My job is to get 4, 5, 6 members of a key committee to lobby the chairperson to commit to hearings next year. I'd like to see them as soon as February, end of February latest. So that's the strategy that's underway right now. There's a lot of people involved and helping out around the world. And here are the websites from which this is being organized. The Citizen Hearing on Disclosure is fully explained and housed at citizenhearing.org. There, you can actually now download, acquire, purchase commercial quality downloads of the Citizen Hearing on Disclosure, the whole 30 hours. And you can learn about it, what went on, and you can see the witnesses, and you can read their bios and so forth. Now, the social media campaign, which is designed to help ensure that we get the meetings on the Hill we need to persuade a committee to hold the hearings, is being orchestrated from 3 locations. One, it is being run from a website called factsonwashington.org. That's FAX on Washington.org. From the Facebook page, the Disclosure Lobby, and from another website called disclosure.media. And that's a domain, disclosure.media. There you find all the information necessary to send in both Twitter and Facebook messages to all of the members of the House and Senate, as many as you want, as often as you want. You can also find direct links that will take you to the email form pages for the House and the Senate. Only U.S. citizens can email the Congress. You can email any of the senators. All you have to do is provide a U.S. address. But you're only allowed to email your representative, your one representative in Congress, by providing an address in the district of that member. And so there's some limits there. More importantly, anybody in the world can participate in the social media. They can participate in Twitter and Facebook. So we've got a lot of people from around the world that are sending these messages into Congress from many countries. And that's important because the issue is obviously global. So that's been underway since November the 5th and is making excellent progress. The next phase will be the meetings with the initial staff, and that's going to take place pretty soon. Things have been slowed down a little bit because the politics after the election was much more involved and complex than I expected. Normally things quiet down, but not in this case. A tremendous amount has happened in the last 30 to 40 days, including the immigration presidential directive, the issuance of the Senate Intelligence Terror Report, obviously the demonstrations around the triggered by the verdicts from the grand jury in both the Brown case and the other case, which escapes my mind right now. It's been just intense, not only in the media but also in the political situation. And so I decided I didn't want to try to force my way into that circus. Just too much going on. So we're probably going to really get underway after the 114th Congress starts on January the 3rd. So in a nutshell, that is what's going on. Now, the purpose of all this is singular. We want disclosure. We want to put the president in a position where he has to announce the ET presence. Probably because the media is about to go essentially into what we call a frenzy mode on the issue, which is what hearings would do. It would trigger a media frenzy on this, where they simply would operate outside of the truth embargo boundaries that they've been working behind now for six and a half decades. For the president to do disclosure, he has to cut a deal with the Pentagon, but we believe the Pentagon would be receptive, that that deal has to be struck. He cannot go forward without them agreeing to provide what he needs and him agreeing to provide what the Pentagon needs in terms of the event as well as the after period, the post-disclosure rule. So we're essentially trying to force that meeting to take place. And I'll be making the case for this on the Hill. Got a pretty good idea what I'll be saying, both to Republicans and Democrats. So these hearings, either they're eminent being imminent or actually taking place, will hopefully be the trigger that sets the ball in motion to give us disclosure. The last time there were hearings was 1968. It's been 46 years, and that's not an accident. The Congress has steadfastly avoided having any hearings, and all efforts have been blocked, particularly since 1992, because those inside know, those that know this issue inside, know that hearings for the kinds of witnesses ready to testify now would be the ballgame. That would be it. And so they just haven't held them. It is notable, and I'll finish up with this, that in spite of the fact that hearings would probably end the truth embargo, there has been no obvious effort to block PRG's progress here. Nothing that I'm aware of, which I note with great interest. So I'm optimistic that we're going to accomplish pretty much what we set out to do and get a commitment on these hearings within the next 60 to 90 days.
Thanks for giving us the inside scoop on that. A couple of things about disclosure that I want to discuss. First of all, just for the hell of it, Alfred Weber has said that disclosure is a bad word to use. That's not the word you should be using. He did explain why. I can't really remember what exactly he did to plead his case, but I believe it did have something to do with the fact that everything, in a sense, has already been disclosed. Lots of whistleblowers and conspiracy theorists and investigative journalists have come out to expose the ET cover-up. The problem is that the general public simply will not believe it or will not accept it, because ETs and UFOs is one of those things that just shuts people off. And because of that, well, you're not disclosing, you're trying to, I guess, get the public to accept more, is what Alfred was trying to say. So in regards to that whole idea of disclosure being a misnomer because everything's already been disclosed, it's just the public won't accept it or believe it. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, it's not, in my opinion, understanding what's going on. There's several problems there. Let me clarify them. The disclosure we're seeking is an event. It's called capital D disclosure, not small d, capital D. And it refers to an event. It's defined as that. It's been that way, defined that way now for quite a while, going back almost 15 years. It is the formal acknowledgement of the extraterrestrial presence by the head of state. It's an event. It can be over in 5 seconds, 10 seconds. My fellow Americans, there are extraterrestrials here. Thank you. Good night. That's disclosure. Small D disclosure has been going on in one form or another for the last 6.5 decades, without question. But whatever that process has been, whatever's been divulged through small D disclosure, it hasn't been enough to trigger the acknowledgement by the heads of state of nations. So the public has not been given the official announcement, which is very, very important. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that it's not about convincing the people on this issue. That's not what this strategy is about. Over half the American people have already indicated through polling that they believe the phenomenon is real and extraterrestrial. And that number actually is skewed to demographics to higher income, higher salaries. Higher education. So in other words, while the national mean is around 50%, if you have higher income, higher education, it's probably more in the 60% range. So you have 60% of the people in this country that are making good money and have good education already know the ET presence is real. And that includes the members of Congress and their staff, who pretty much most of them fall into that category. Right? So it's not a matter of convincing the public. They're already convinced. The issue is ending the truth embargo. Right? It's like there are plenty of people that wanted to go to Cuba and felt they should, but they couldn't because there was an embargo. Right? So it wasn't a question of convincing the people that Cuba was a nice place to go. It was taking the embargo down so they could go. And that's what's happening here. Until we have formal acknowledgement of this issue, we are not going to have access to government information. We're not going to have access to technology derived from ET vehicles and a host of other things. And we're going to continue to run around in circles. And so this is a political activist movement targeting the White House, basically, ultimately, which is where disclosure has to come. But we're right now focused on the Congress, but they're all tied together. So that's, what's going on. So I think the problem there is what you described earlier, is a misperception of the advocacy process and the reality of the issue with respect to people.
Yes, and when the ET presence is truly officially revealed by the mainstream media and the government, hypothetically, let's say, people would assert that all hell would break loose then. Look what happened with the Orson Welles War of the World's radio show broadcast. He said the Martians were invading. Over 1 million people believed what they heard, and then there was chaos in the streets. And now, recently, in some of my interviews with my previous guests, they're talking about how in around 2017, there's going to be a big consciousness shift for humanity. The ETs are going to show themselves at will. We're talking like motherships over the cities, and I was telling them, well, should we be optimistic about that? Because if those ETs show themselves, there's going to be chaos in the streets. It's going to put the Orson Welles War of the World's radio show broadcast. It's going to make that look like a walk in the park because people are going to go nuts. Well, some of the people I spoke to said, nah, people are going to be able to handle the truth by that time. Don't worry, everything's going to be cool. But some would beg to differ, agree to disagree on this issue. So the whole idea of all hell breaking loose, chaos in the streets, because people can't handle the truth if disclosure happens, what do you have to say about that?
I hear it all the time. First of all, the Orson Welles broadcast was back in, it was 33, I can't remember the year. I think it was in the 30s. It was many decades ago. Secondly, it wasn't the truth, it was a lie. The broadcast was, as everyone pretty much knows now, was a false show depicting, in a real sense, an invasion by extraterrestrials. It wasn't really happening. The radio, particularly at that time, had a great deal of authority. People, it was like very powerful technology, and so if you heard it on the radio, it must be important. And a bunch of people jumped into the show after the disclaimers had already been given because they were watching another show on another network, a very popular radio show that was being aired at the same time. So they didn't hear the disclaimers, and they got upset because they were being given a very hyped up account of an alien invasion that they thought was real. That almost has no relevance to what's going on now. What we're seeking is not a lie, we're seeking the truth. And not a hyped up truth about an alien invasion, but rather the truth about an extraterrestrial presence. And so the President of the United States coming in front of a microphone in the East Wing of the White House and telling the American people that there's an extraterrestrial presence, that we've known about it, but we couldn't inform you before for national security reasons, but we can tell you about it now, that there is no threat that you need to be concerned about, is quite a different matter than a false radio program saying that aliens are killing people somewhere in New Jersey. So that's completely bogus and not relevant at all. But it's used all the time. It's part of the truth embargo. It's part of the propaganda. The government put out all kinds of propaganda to dissuade people from engaging the issue. Most of that propaganda, the Brookings Report and these other kinds of memes, are primarily targeting people inside government to help convince them that they need to honor their security oaths, their non-disclosure agreements, and keep their mouth shut. Because if they did, well, the world would collapse. People would go crazy, run naked down the street, yada, yada, yada. It's all BS. It's all propaganda. So it's not true. Now, it is the case that if the government of the United States cannot see its way to ending this truth embargo, the extraterrestrials, who can pretty much do whatever the hell they want, might, and I say might, I don't know what their agenda is. I don't know for certain, with any certainty. Decide enough is enough, and we need to move forward. And so they might very well make a very profound display that would end the issue. And whatever that display was, I doubt it'd be Independence Day type display, but whatever that display was, that would be definitely disconcerting. That would be upsetting. There's no question about it. So we don't want that, which is just one of the many, many reasons why the government needs to proactively disclose now and not be in a position where they have to confess to the American people who are screaming bloody murder because there are saucers flying all over the place in broad daylight. So again, disclosure is the right course. It's the least destructive course. It will help regain some trust in government, because when you tell people the truth, that's when they start to trust you. And I have no equivocation about pursuing disclosure as soon as possible.
Thanks. And the whole idea of how you can convince the public that there is an ET presence on planet Earth, well, I personally have a favorite way of going about convincing people that there is an ET presence on planet Earth. I'd like to tell you what that is. It's convincing people that Earth's moon is a giant artificial body. Let me quickly run down the facts here. The same side of the moon faces us all the time, which implies either it doesn't rotate or it rotates at the same rate that it orbits the Earth, which is a rare anomaly in and of itself. Even more rare than that is the fact that it perfectly eclipses the sun. It's just in the right place in the sky and just the right size in relation to the sun for it to do that. So that's a huge cosmic coincidence that seems too good to be true. The moon's center of mass is in a different location than its center of gravity, which should make it a very wobbly orbit around the Earth, but instead it's 99.9% perfectly circular. And if you ask me, the biggest dead giveaway that the moon is artificial, the fact that all the moon's craters, except for the really small ones, all go down to the same depth regardless of diameter, implying there's some impenetrable artificial surface there. And of course the NASA craft, when they land on the moon, it rang like a bell. Now a lot of people who hear me say this would approach this issue with a mentality of, well, I refuse to believe the moon's artificial because I can't handle the truth, it sounds too scary. Well, that is a huge shame, I feel, but hey, if it's the best way to convince people that there's an ET presence, and I feel it is, that's my way of doing that. Now that I've told you about this, do you think maybe it's worthwhile pursuing that mentality to convince people that, well, this is how you have to accept there is an ET presence on Earth?
Well, first and foremost, again, the majority of the people already believe. That doesn't mean that they've seen all the evidence, but simply that they believe, just from what they've seen in their lifetime, growing up during this truth embargo, that the ET presence is real. So they don't need to convince it. And as far as the remaining 40%, they'll get around to it in their own good time. That's not the problem. The problem is the government's position, not the percentage of people in the country that is convinced ETs are here. As for the moon issue, you seem to have it down pretty well. I'm familiar with that issue. It's been out there for a good while now. There's been a couple of interesting books. One is called Who Made the Moon, which is kind of a nice read. It's intriguing. Would it shock me? No. Can it be proved beyond a reasonable doubt in such a way to become a major, news story? Not yet. If it were to suddenly be proven, and by something happening, something obvious, something profound, it would certainly end the question of other intelligent life in the galaxy. However, that doesn't mean there's any of that intelligent life is visiting us now. But it would be a huge blow to the truth embargo. Fortunately, unfortunately, we don't have to do that. We have more than enough witnesses, more than enough evidence. All we need is for the media, by and large, to take the leash off that's been on. The media is like a dog that's been staked out in the front yard, got a chain on, and it can roam around the front yard, but it can't go past the length of that chain. And that's where the media has been chained to the front yard. My job is to break that chain, and when I do, the media can pretty much go over it once, and that's it. The truth embargo cannot sustain even a modestly intense media engagement on this issue, beyond what they've been doing. They've written thousands of articles, but they haven't gone investigation mode. And my job is to give them the excuse to do that. So, again, it's an interesting concept, and it makes for a great show. If you can get anybody on your show, particularly like the authors of the book, Who Made the Moon, I'd make a fascinating show. I'd love to know one way or the other. But it isn't necessary for what we're trying to accomplish, which is to get the president to finally announce the ET president.
Thanks. And let's talk about the whole what was going on 67 years ago in regards to there being a ET presence attempting to be revealed by the government. A couple of issues about this. First of all, Richard Dolan has talked about how Project Blue Book, it was a joke of an operation. That's a direct quote from him, a joke of an operation. And also in regards to the whole Majestic 12 documents, I believe Stan Friedman said that Donald Menzel, one of the people on there, he had a job in discrediting people who believe in ETs and UFOs, which to him is a dead giveaway. There's obviously some sort of a cover-up here to suggest that MJ12 and Project Blue Book had anything to do with trying to disclose the truth seems kind of ridiculous, some would assert. But why don't you give us a little history lesson here in regards to what was happening 67 years ago, and tell us about Blue Book, MJ12, and anything else involving ET disclosure back then, 67 years ago.
We're starting to piece together a reasonably good, but far from complete, history of the ET presence post-1946 and the truth embargo post-1946. And we know a great deal, thanks to the work of people like Stan Friedman and, of course, Richard Dolan and many, many, many others. Frank Cameron. We have a pretty good idea, but again, we don't have all of the dots, so some of the structure, some of the model, it may prove to be off the mark. But the overall model is, I think, relatively good. Essentially, the ET presence exploded into the modern psyche in 47 because they intensified their activity. I think they've been around for a good while, coming and going back as far as you want to go. But something changed in around 1947 that caused them to alter their engagement. And what we believe, and this is a growing consensus, is that what changed was the dropping of the two bombs in Japan by the United States. Not just the creation of the atomic bomb, but rather the use of it on human beings. I think that was the trigger point that essentially launched them into a new phase of their engagement of the planet, which had a relatively straightforward end game. So that starts in 47. The cat almost got out of the bag at Roswell. The government was able to keep it in the bag just barely, and it definitely frightened them. They realized that these ETs can do what they want, come and go, and they have a decision to make. Are they going to keep this from the American people, and how can they keep it from the American people, given the extraterrestrial presence is not in their control? And they mulled this over. 1948, 49, 50, 51, things were happening. There were sightings being made, but they weren't getting pressured too much. In general, I think they felt they had things under control. Plus, the government was held in very high regard at that time, for obvious reasons. And then something else happened. In the same month, July, but 5 years after Roswell, ET craft turned up over Washington, D.C. for several days. Why the ETs chose to do this, only they know. But I tell you, it scared the hell out of the government, because now they realized that unless they took draconian measures, this was going to eventually become public. So they convened a panel called the Robertson Panel, CIA panel, in the very late '52, and that panel was designed to begin the formulation of what would become a truth embargo. The panel concluded, which we learned later because it was not publicly stated at the time, that the phenomena did not seem to pose a direct threat to the United States. However, the public's engagement of this was a threat, and therefore the public's engagement of this issue needed to be contained. Starting in 1953, the truth embargo starts to get serious attention, and they threw everything at it they had. And by '53, they had the CIA, they had the NSA, they had substantially growing intelligence capabilities, technology, and so forth. And classification schemes were being well established, and the various protocols that would become the secret empire were well underway. And they had unlimited resources, pretty much, at their disposal. And so from '53 on, we've had a dual-track national security process underway that led to the creation of the greatest classified intelligence black program complex the world's ever seen. And the two tracks were, one, the Soviet threat, which, of course, could lead to World War III and nuclear war, pretty much the end of all civilization. So it was a very big deal. And the ET presence. And their job, as they saw it, as a national security matter, was to contain the ET awareness from the American people and defeat the Soviet Union. And by 1992, they had done both. So the truth embargo was heavily funded, heavily pursued. Very smart people were involved. They did a pretty good job. It's an extraordinary accomplishment, really. Blue Book, Condon Report, everything that went on, the creation of NASA, the creation of the SETI program, all of this was done in a way to help screen the issue from the American people. Every aspect, anything they could do to keep this issue contained, they did. And the full story will encompass many, many books, if not thousands of books, throughout the remainder of this century. So Richard was absolutely right. Blue Book was a front program designed to show that we were looking at it, and we didn't find anything. Now go away. The actual real investigations by the military were not divulged, and we don't have those files. Well, there are declassified. There are classified Blue Book files that people sort of know about. Almost no one, except maybe Danny Sheen, has ever looked at them or seen them outside of the classified world. But what the government does in this issue is deep black projects under the highest security. Anything that's public is a front. That's just a given. That's basically my answer to your question. The thing that people need to understand now, if the ones that care about this issue, is not, are the saucers real or where are they from? There's a lot out there on that. There's plenty to look at on the net. But that's not the problem. The problem is the government policy of formally refusing to acknowledge this extraterrestrial presence, the truth embargo. That is the issue, and that's what has to be resolved right now. The ETs will do what they want, when they want, how they want. And that is not in my control or our control. However, we can control this government policy by ending it. And it's notable that the day that I'm giving this interview to you is the day that the United States, after 53 years, decided to end the embargo of Cuba, which is another embargo that was many years past its usefulness, its shelf life. I find that very interesting, very notable. So one embargo down, one to go.
All right, and getting back to the UFOs flying over Washington, D.C., There was an episode of Hangar 1. I am looking forward to the second season, by the way. But one of the first episodes of the first season did talk about presidential treaties and such, and Eisenhower supposedly being in on a treaty that was signed by extraterrestrials. However, in my interview with Laura Eisenhower, she's talked about this, and I believe I did talk about this in my interview with her, that treaty that was signed with ETs and Eisenhower in the 50s, it had actually been in effect during the time of the presidency of FDR, Franklin Roosevelt, and it became official, if that makes sense, during the time of Eisenhower. And if you really want to get technical about what it was, Alfred Weber and others have talked about how that was gray aliens, malevolent gray aliens from the Orion constellation, and they actually take orders from malevolent reptilian aliens from the Alpha Draconis star system. They were signing a treaty with the government to let them use technology and such, and the UFOs flying over D.C. in the 50s, that was after the treaty, a consequence of the treaty, that was Orion Gray spacecraft flying over. Would you think maybe there is some truth to everything I've said, or do you maybe not want to go there? What do you have to say about this?
I won't go there, but there may be truth to this. I'm familiar with these stories. I'm familiar with some of the evidence. The evidence has been brought forward to support this model. The evidence is thin, however. And as far as I'm concerned, at this point in time, as I move forward with the advocacy, these assertions have not been proven. Certainly not beyond a reasonable doubt, and frankly, not beyond an unreasonable doubt. Would I be shocked to know that some sort of arrangements or deals were struck with extraterrestrials? Down the line, no, I would not be shocked. Can I simply go out in front of the people and say that's the way it is? Absolutely not. It just hasn't been proven. There's a great deal in this issue that hasn't been proven. That has a certain probability factor. There are things that I hear people talking about that I can assign in my own mind maybe 80-90% to. There's a lot that I hear about that I provide maybe 10% to. Everything has to be assessed that way. There are only a few things that approach absolute in this world, and that would be the laws of physics, and even they're not 100%. Give them 99.5, 99.8. So all I can say is I cannot state that such arrangements exist. Signed treaties, of course, would not exist. Signatures are only important when you're dealing within a agreed upon legal system. So a ET signature would have absolutely no legal bearing. These have simply been deals. So I don't criticize people that push these out strongly, discuss them at great length, elaborate on them. Because it's a logical possibility, and there is a bit of evidence here and there that sort of creates the possibility that it may have happened. No big deal. But in terms of the advocacy track requires that we stay much closer to Occam's razor's edge. And so I pretty much don't stray too far from what I consider the core evidentiary basis. The rest, I leave to others.
Well, it's your prerogative. I hope you didn't take offense to me saying, or do you not want to go there? It's just that there's people that don't like to speculate, and it's kind of hard to know whether or not I have a guest that likes to speculate. Hey, I like to speculate a lot, but some people like Linda Moulton Howe, she told me she likes to stick with facts, and also Stan Freeman, he likes to stick with facts, and I have full respect for people that do that. There's nothing wrong with that. But I'm glad you're cool with it. But let's talk about a couple of things here in regards to who's controlling the UFOs and such. Stan Friedman, one thing that he's gotten criticized for, he says the military does not control the UFOs. The government does have a UFO cover-up, an ET cover-up, he asserts, but it's not the military. His argument is if it was the military, they would have used it in the wars, the UFO technology in the wars. But in my interview with Bill Burns and also John Lear, and John Ventry also said he agrees with John and Bill on this issue, that the reason we didn't use the UFOs in the wars is because we didn't have to. There was plenty of less sophisticated technology going around that we could have used in the wars. Therefore, using the UFOs was not necessary for any of the given sides to win the war. Do you agree with that? And you think maybe Stanton might be a little off on his assertion because of that?
Well, we don't know. No one, I believe, can say exactly what the government's position was with respect to using extraterrestrial-derived technology in warfare. It appears they didn't do it. I'm quite certain they have. ET technology, heavily reversed engineered, heavily studied. And it appears that they haven't used that technology in war, but that can't be proven. It's possible they could have, in a limited way, and we wouldn't know about it. But if asked to speculate on this, which I'm happy to do, I mean, there's nothing wrong with speculating if you acknowledge you're speculating. What's wrong is when you speculate, but assert it as fact, and know it's not fact. That's not so good. The first thing that comes to mind is that had they used ET technology, particularly anti-gravitics, in war, it would have threatened the truth in Bravo. I mean, obviously, it would have been out. People would have seen it, and there would have been huge questions raised. Where did you get that check? And so I would think that the necessity to maintain the truth embargo would have precluded using ET technology in war, particularly if you didn't need to. And obviously, we didn't need to. I'm sure that if we ended up in a major war with a major power, like China or Russia, and some nuclear weapons got involved, I don't think they'd hesitate to bring out ET technology if it had weapons capability. But obviously we don't want that, and that's not where things are going, I don't believe. So overall, the U.S. was able to prosecute the Cold War, contain the Soviet Union, ultimately resulting in the breakup of the Soviet Union, somewhat of a democratization of Russia, and a post-Cold War era. And they also were able to contain the ET issue so that even today, the president can flatly state there's no evidence at all, when I'm almost certain that he knows better. In other words, that statement by the White House on October the 4th of 2011 is completely false and almost certainly a lie, meaning that the people within the White House that know it's a lie and could have prevented its being published. However, understand that lying in the service of national security is a fully accepted behavior. The American people know that we do it all the time, and they essentially give license to the government to lie. Now, American people feel that they're getting a good deal there because they feel they're being protected. But unfortunately, that policy of institutional lying, while it may have short-term benefits, could ultimately bring down the entire republic. And so the American people are going to have to face up to their responsibilities here and decide whether they want to continue down the road they're on, which is basically giving the U.S. government a license to lie all it wants and hoping for the best. I don't think that's going to work anymore.
Yeah, I think people are waking up and catching on too, and that's certainly good. Here's another thing for makes for good radio show conversation. Well, first of all, let me just say I'll be taking calls at 7:15 Eastern Standard Time, area code 804. You're up first, and I see Chris for real in the queue. You will be second after area code 804. But one thing that makes for good radio show conversation, the accuracy of the work of Bob Lazar. When I did have Stanton Friedman on my show, I gave him the opportunity, even though I did differ with him on this one, to keep my show impartial. I gave him the chance to explain why he believes what he believes about Bob Lazar, and asserting that Bob could not have been where he said he was, and also that element 115, its half-life is too short before the ETs could do anything with it. It would decay in a heartbeat. But when I had John Lear on my show, he said, well, first of all, the first thing John did, I think was kind of uncool. He played Attack the Messenger, and I didn't like that. He said, Stan's always saying he's a nuclear physicist, but he's never had a job in nuclear physics. He's got a degree, but he's never had a job. And I thought it was uncool for John to do that because he was playing Attack the Messenger. John Lear did. Yeah, John Lear did. Yeah, and also, but then John did plead his case and said that Stan got it totally off course in regards to element 115. Because element 115 has several different isotopes, and the one that Bob Lazar was talking about comes from a solar system that's much bigger than the solar system we're in, and the fact that it's a bigger solar system allows for bigger elements to exist and bigger isotopes of element 115, and that's the kind that Bob Lazar was talking about. So the whole half-life issue is not a problem. So in regards to this whole thing about the accuracy of Bob Lazar's work, and also John Lear and such have said that all that stuff about Bob not being where he was, first of all, they either deleted his records, changed his records, and people were lying when they said they didn't know him when they did know him. That could easily be explained away there. I know some people would beg to differ on that. I know George Knapp during the MUFON conference did say that Stan was right when he said Bob Lazar was not where he claimed he was, but some say no, Stan was just misled or whatever. But the whole issue of the accuracy of Bob Lazar's work, what do you think about that whole thing?
Okay. First and foremost, I believe the core story of Lazar's interaction with the government at Area 51 is true. And probably the most important reason why I think it's true. Proven beyond a reasonable doubt? No. True, though, is a matter. And the reason that is that somebody that is extremely familiar with Lazar and the whole story is a gentleman by the name of George Knapp. And George Knapp is one of the sharpest people out there that has been willing to address this issue. It's not his day job. He is a top investigative reporter working for KLS-TV in Los Angeles, has been for a lot of awards, tons of Emmys. George believes Lazar, and for me, that is huge. I believe that the Lazar story has disinformation in it, and it's very possible that disinformation is government orchestrated, meaning Lazar didn't come up with it, the government gave it to him and he passed it on. But I'm speculating here. But when you isolate just the core stuff of the story and then you factor in a disinformation effort by the government, either deliberately or as a matter of damage control, it kind of accounts for the whole episode, going back to the beginning. Let me add that Stanton Friedman most certainly is a nuclear physicist, and he did work in nuclear physics for a number of years. So you put that to bed. Stan has some legitimate concerns about Lazar's story, which I certainly respect. I think, though, those concerns can be answered by the disinformation component. This kind of, again, the truth embargo has been masterfully conducted using every technique appropriate that would work, everything. They left no stone unturned. And we know they do this. They will, if somebody is a potential problem to the truth embargo, one way that they're able to contain it is to feed disinformation from one source or another to this individual, so that when they come forward with what would be some fully factual components of the history of the issue, they're also got some bad information. And then all you have to do is point that out. Again, using cutouts and intermediaries, and with the internet, it's extremely easy to operate this way. And point out these clear problems, and thus discredit the person's entire state. One has to be pretty sharp to not be abused in that way. And I think some people are able to figure that out and avoid it. It's possible I've been fed some disinformation from time to time. I have plenty of people coming at me with stuff. But I've got a really good nose for it. And I don't think I've been bitten on that one. So, again, that's my take on it. And one of the things I'm really looking forward to getting clarified in the post-disclosure world would be the story of Bob Lazar. I think he's going to come out of this okay, post-disclosure.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I did watch the Bob Lazar video, which is on the UFO TV Studios YouTube channel. There was nothing in that video from a body language perspective that showed that he did know what he was talking about. His eyes weren't moving back and forth either, so he didn't have cue cards in front of him or anything like that. But it just makes for a nice conversation, so I figured I'd bring this up. Another thing that's worth talking about, the whole issue of how to travel through space. Stan Friedman and his colleague Kathleen Martin, they've talked about magneto-hydraulic propulsion, which is great and all, but it doesn't solve the speed of light issue. I mean, as you get closer and closer to the speed of light, you undergo time travel. You do travel into the future because time does slow down for you in that sense. So magneto-hydraulic propulsion can be used as time travel into the future, though, even though it doesn't go faster than light. And, of course, the other problem with that is it only works for nearby star systems. Bob Lazar's Element 115 thing, that would solve that. You're not traveling faster than light. You're bringing space-time towards you. And other people have talked about, yes, there is wormhole technology, and the aliens don't have to create a wormhole as much as they simply amplify a wormhole that already exists in the fabric of space-time that they have found. And in my interview with John Lear, he talked about one of the best ways to travel through space is to use quantum entanglement on a macroscopic scale, the whole spooky action at a distance thing where atoms intertwined and then put at opposite ends of the universe, vibrate one, the other one will vibrate instantly. It's been asserted by people that the reason that works is because space and time are illusions, and the fact that space and time are illusions means that the information transfer is not the distance between the particles does not present any sort of a problem in regards to the information transfer between the two particles, even if they're at opposite ends of the universe. And some ETs have been able to exploit this on a more macroscopic scale, and I guess you could call it teleportation in a sense, but that's another way to travel through space and time, to exploit the fact that space and time are illusions. So this whole issue in regards of ETs, what kind of technology that they're using, I mean, what do you have to say about magneto-hydraulic propulsion, Element 115, wormholes, and space and time illusions and all that, and maybe some other technologies that I haven't talked about here?
Well, this is all fascinating stuff, and I love it. It's all in the Freeman Dyson Michio area, Brian Greene. It's physics. It's cosmology. The connection to the ET issue is fundamentally with respect to propulsion systems right now, though the energy systems also get into it. And there's a simple common sense factor. The ETs have more physics than we do. I don't think anybody should be surprised by it. At this point, we are unable, we're getting close, to understand travel outside of the relativistic framework. ETs, obviously, know more about the framework, or they know about other frameworks. And so they're traveling non-relativistically. One of the questions is whether the saucers, which we call them saucers, ET craft that look kind of saucer-like, there may be, in other words, anti-gravitic propulsion and interstellar propulsion or interstellar physics, travel physics, may not be the same thing, or they may be related. Are the saucers able to travel interstellar? Don't know. A more logical assessment would be that they have ships, large ships, that travel interstellar using another aspect of their technology. And the saucers come from those large ships or travel within those larger ships. But they also, but they have antigravitics as well. And anyway, they're able to deal with gravity in interesting ways. They know more about it. And but I think an even larger point here is that the presence of these craft, the presence of these ETs for the last 67 years, at least in the modern era, has stimulated the thinking of millions people who have tried to figure out in their own mind how do these things work. And as uncertainly for those, there's a lot, probably more than half of the scientists working today believe the extraterrestrial presence is real. They just can't talk about it. They won't talk about it. But believe me, they're smart people, and if the average person in the street can figure it out, so can they. But so they probably spend a lot of time thinking about it, and there are people within, obviously, the classified world that work on it all the time. And I'm sure this reality has sped up our physics, certainly in the classified world. It wouldn't surprise me if we now understand interstellar travel. I'm certain that we understand antigravitic propulsion. It's probable that we have figured out the energy systems. And all of this is being hidden and sequestered from us while the human race faces insurmountable, growing and seemingly insurmountable problems that are starting to pretty much create almost chaos. And every indicator shows that they're going to get worse. And so it is no longer acceptable that extraordinary technology that create new paradigms in dealing with our fundamental issues can be withheld simply because the government finds it inconvenient to tell the world that there's an ET presence. So that's my basic take on that. The specifics of these scientific speculations are intriguing, and you can talk all night about them, but ultimately, I think the most important thing right now is ending the truth embargo, because whatever the truth of these scientific speculations is, we are going to have a hell of a lot easier time getting to those truths post-disclosure than we are now, when science is being corrupted by propaganda and government agendas. Just like the Catholic Church corrupted the solar system science of Copernicus and Kepler and Galileo, which really was a mistake, which they eventually apologized for. The U.S. government is doing the same thing, probably in an even more profound way, about something even far more important today. And I think the government needs to learn from the Catholic Church's experiences that it's a bad call, bad decision. However, having said that, let me reiterate, circumstances from 47 to 91 were extraordinary. They were outside the box. You had people that grew up at the beginning of the 20th century, the children during the Great Depression, who were suddenly faced with what to do about a developing conflict between the then greatest power on earth, the United States, and this vast empire called the Soviet Union that had all the prospects of being nuclear. And nuclear weapons technology was going to advance. Weapons were going to be stockpiled in the tens of thousands. This was just, and a war would be the end of civilization. Not just a bump in the road, but the end of the ball game. This is what they were facing. And so I respect the fact that while telling the truth on this issue is inevitable and must take place, I get that during the Cold War it had to be contained. But that's 22 years ago. Cold War's been over 22 years. Now it's time to come clean.
All right. Since you mentioned science of the solar system in regards to covering that up, there is a related issue that I would like to discuss. The whole issue of, a lot of the people at the MUFON conference, I noticed in their presentations when they tried to convince people that there's definitely ETs out there, they used the whole Goldilocks zone factor of planets being in the right place like Earth is for life, and also the Drake equation to show how common life is. Well, it has been asserted by some, including John Lear, and we discussed the science behind what I'm about to discuss in my interview with him. It has been asserted by many that anybody who uses the Drake equation and the Goldilocks zone for determining ET life is being way too conservative, because it turns out that life is a lot more prevalent because stars and planets are different from how we're being told. First of all, with all due respect to Stan Friedman, he was spreading disinfo when he said at the hearing, saying that all stars in the universe are powered by nuclear fusion. That's one of the biggest lies we've been told in mainstream science. In reality, stars are electromagnetic. They're hotspots on a universal level of electromagnetic energy. And the real reason the corona is so much hotter than the surface of the sun is because stars get their energy from the outside, not the inside. And stars being electromagnetic, they don't radiate heat. They radiate electromagnetic energy to the planets, and the planets have their own filtering systems, and their atmospheres play a big role in the planet's atmosphere and their filtering system in general. They convert the sun's electromagnetic energy into some final product in conjunction with the planet that allows for life to exist on every planet regardless of its size or location. And it goes without saying that the Anunnaki that Zecharia Sitchin talked about on the planet Nibiru, I've gone over how I know Zecharia Sitchin was right on previous shows. I'm not going to talk about it now because it's going to take up too much time. But the Anunnaki do exist. Nibiru does exist. And the reason they can survive on Nibiru, even though it's in a 3,600-year elliptical orbit very far from the sun, is because every planet's filtering system and the way stars actually work allows for life to exist on every planet regardless of its size or location. So there's life everywhere. And a lot of people would say, well, if this is true, why aren't we getting radio signals from the other planets in the solar system that have life on them? Well, who says that they're using radio technology? I mean, you have to understand Earth is a prison planet. It's a hell down here. But the other planets, they have ETs of higher consciousness. They don't have to worry about using radio signals. They can communicate in other ways, other psychic ways, if you will. So that answers that question. But this whole revolutionary idea that life is everywhere because planets use filtering systems and stars are electromagnetic and not nuclear and transfer energy, do you think maybe that's something we should be taking a little bit more seriously?
You referred to a number of interesting theories out there. We'll see whether they hold up. The electric universe is a theory. It's relatively new. The cosmological physics of stars has been around for a good while and pretty well developed. That doesn't mean it's right, but since I do have a physics degree, I am interested in science and I follow it pretty well. I'm relatively comfortable with the nuclear theory of stars, but it's not critical to the work that I'm doing. And as far as the theories about Anunnaki and Nibiru and all these other things, all interesting. Have they been proven beyond a reasonable doubt? I don't think so. But there are hints. Absent the full engagement of our society, the universities, the philanthropic organizations, the media, government research, above-ground public research, we are at a huge disadvantage in trying to parse the truth of the entire history of the ET engagement of this planet, which may go back forever. And that's just a fact. So until disclosure, we're operating with a lot of pieces of the puzzle not in the box. And we're operating with a bunch of pieces from other puzzles that have been thrown in the box by the government in order to make it even harder to put the puzzle together. This is wasting a lot of people's time and effort and money. And so all I can say is that I look forward to seeing all of this, or certainly most of this, resolved, studied, understood, clarified, honed down, including the standard scientific method and peer review and all of that, and so that we have a clear, concise, teachable knowledge about the extraterrestrial reality and much more information about the cosmology of our galaxy post-disclosure. But it's not going to happen pre-disclosure. We're making some progress, and there's scientific work being done on warp drive concepts, on ground field energy, and all of these things. But in the public domain, we haven't reached the goal line yet. I believe they have reached the goal line in the secret domain. So, nevertheless, will we solve these or resolve these issues on our own without disclosure, given enough time? I think so. But we don't have enough time. The human race has managed to put itself in a rather dire position as of the 21st century. It's pushed the envelope pretty much as far as it can go. And barring a dramatic change and some significant reform, the airplane's going to crash into the ground and burn. And the question about the pilot's future will be moot. And so the problem right now is not, can we figure these things out? Can we get back on course? Can we reform our institutions? The problem is, can we do it soon enough? And that's where the advocate comes in. The activist comes in and says, this policy needs to change, and it needs to change right away. And the timing is oftentimes as important as the idea. So it's not enough to say, look, within 100 years, this will all be resolved. Within 100 years, we could have 2 massive nuclear wars, and there might not be enough civilization left to form a bridge club. So I don't think we have the luxury of waiting any longer, and that's why we do the work that we do. That's why the advocacy work is so important. But I can't say much more than that. All interesting theories, Andrew, but not proven to my satisfaction. But nevertheless, all worthy of consideration. And somewhere in there are probably some truths that will be useful someday.
Well, I can tell you one useful truth. We've been lied to about looking at the sun will hurt your vision. I'm an avid sun gazer. I look at the sun even at high noon when I'm walking down the street, and I can tell you for a fact, looking at the sun does a body well, a mind well, and a spirit well. It does not hurt your vision, so that should change our understanding from a medical standpoint of what the sun does. So I hope that you learned something from that. It's just an interesting fact. I do like encouraging people to sun gaze, as it's called. But changing the subject, getting back to other issues. Area 51, Bill Burns, in my interview with him, he told me that exotic technology has been moved out of Area 51. People are catching on to what's going on there, so they're moving the technology, and he did say all exotic technology has been removed. And also, Akashic Records reader Andrew Bartz has said in regards to what technology is at Area 51, it's there is, UFO and ET technology, no question, but they also have time travel technology at Area 51, he said, and if anything, that we should be more concerned with that than we should be with ET stuff. Time travel may fall out of the realm of this conversation, but there is some ET involvement there nonetheless. But anyway, the whole issue of Area 51, them having moved exotic technology out of there, can you confirm that what Bill says is true, and where are they moving it to? Like, there's an Area 52, I hear, and I believe it's in Utah. Maybe you could tell me about that.
I have no way of confirming that. I don't have that kind of information on that access. It wouldn't surprise me if they moved it, some of it or all of it, out of Area 51 because of all the attention that that particular race has gotten. So someone says that that's what they've heard. I'm not shocked by it, but again, I can't confirm. The government has, a pretty good situation. They have vast sums of money. They've got underground facilities. They have classified programs, classified people. Access is limited, so they pretty much do anything they want. So generally, I'm not too worried about the government being able to handle it, at least the military intelligence complex has pretty much got it made. So I don't worry too much about it. I don't think about it too much. It doesn't matter where the technology is. What matters is they've got it. Right? The details can get in the way of good advocacy. Advocacy is about 3 things: focus, focus, and focus. You have to pick a goal that would be significantly impacting and the right thing to do, and go get it. And so, as I've said countless times, if you want to know the truth about what truth lies in all of these theories, stories, speculations, get the truth embargo over. End it. Because that is the fastest path to getting the information out that will allow us to sort through this. More importantly, once this information is in the public domain, then the entire intellectual resource of 7 billion people in 200 countries can be brought to bear to suss it all out, right? And there will be considerable motivation to do that. It'll be quite intense. And I don't think it'll take that long before we have a lot of things clearly understood post-disclosure. And that'll be an extremely exciting time. And that's just one reason. There are many reasons it'll be an exciting time. But going into disclosure, before disclosure, we're drowning in a sea of theories and speculation. You can have a certain amount of that, but you've got to have some solid ground underneath you too. And right now we're standing in a swamp and we're up to our eyebrows. And the government likes it that way. The government has encouraged this. The government has helped to ensure this. Because if we're stuck in a swamp of theories and speculation, we're not going anywhere. And that's where they like it. That's unacceptable to me. So it's not we need to drain the swamp, but it's going to take disclosure to do that.
Damn straight, well said. I'm looking here on the Paradigm Research Group main page, and I see a couple of things about Barack Obama. Well, that's interesting because in my interview with whistleblower Andrew Bashago, we talked about how when he and Obama were part of secret government programs like Project Pegasus, and one thing that they did was go to Mars. And it's interesting how Project Camelot, they tried to do a TV show on the True TV network. It only aired after, the show got canceled after only one episode. Gee, I wonder why. And that one episode was about Mars. It was supposed to air before the presidential election, but it didn't air until after the 2012 presidential election because, well, the word on the street is because it talked about one of the things in that episode was how Barack Obama took part in a secret government space program to Mars, and they did not want people to see that before the election because Obama was the puppet of choice for the powers that be and not Romney. So they didn't want that to change the outcome of the election, so they did that. But with that being said, in regards, it says here, Barack Obama, UFO, among other projects and initiatives, and a few other things here I see in Obama. What is it about Obama that you guys seem to think is important? Is it perhaps this stuff that Andrew Bashago talked about? Can you maybe elaborate on that?
Well, the most important thing about Barack Obama is the President of the United States. And since disclosure with a capital D has got to come from the executive office, that makes him fairly important to disclosure. And my job right now is to my job is to help ensure that he becomes the disclosure president. I have no desire to wait until the next president. And so I'll be talking to people on the Hill about that at great length, I can assure you. So I would say this, I've talked about this before. I believe that Bill Clinton and George Bush were not viewed very favorably by the military intelligence community as candidates to be the disclosure president. I don't think they wanted it and resisted it. I think Obama is less of a problem for them. I don't think he's ideal by any means, but I think they can live with him. I think they could have lived with Hillary Clinton. They could have lived with John McCain. So going into the 2008 election, I was feeling very good that we were maybe about to reach breakthrough. But what I didn't see coming until it happened, didn't affect me because I took a vow of poverty years ago, was the Republicans were going to essentially do a scorched earth policy. Knowing they were going to lose the election, they basically set up the whole financial collapse or advanced it so they would happen before the election. And got Lehman Brothers essentially convinced them to not wait and go ahead and bankrupt out. And then go to the people and go to the Congress and say we're in a major crisis and we need billions upon billions of dollars. Started a whole mass bailout program that was well underway before Obama even got into the White House. He had really no option but to continue it. So essentially the greatest theft in all of human history took place between late October of 2008 and the first 2 years of the administration. And that pretty much neutered Obama's prospects of being the disclosure president during that period. There was no way it was going to get entertained. And so I just didn't see that coming. The Republicans can be pretty draconian. Not a lot of boundaries there. So, but on general terms, I think the military intelligence complex can deal with them. And that's my hope, that the deal will be struck soon with the Pentagon so that Obama can go in front of the American people. See, the president can't go in front of the American people and say, there's an extraterrestrial presence here, I wish I could tell you more, but I can't get any information from the Pentagon. I can't get any support. I can't show any evidence in government hands. So that blocks him out. The Pentagon can't disclose. They can't come out because that's treason. He's their boss. So they're stuck in opposite corners, unable to move forward. My job is to get them out of the corners, in the middle of the room, so they cut a deal, so both are satisfied, and thus the president can proceed. And this is true with whoever the president is. I think they would have loved to have George W. Bush be the disclosure president. They idolized him. He was the guy. He had it all. But he lost. And that's the way it is. He was president during the end of the Cold War, but he had a war going on in Iraq, and there was just no way they could put disclosure together. But in his second term, I think they could have done it. Might well have done it. But he didn't have a second term. And so history is unpredictable that way. And history can take interesting turns and twists. Some of those turns can take you down a 30-year blind canyon. And not much good happens. That's just the way it is. But right now, I feel we're on the right track. And I think the doors are opening. I think disclosure is close. And barring somebody launching a nuclear weapon at somebody else or a plague, sweeping the North America or God knows what else is in the queue, and we can't get disclosure at this point. We can get it done.
Okay, thanks for giving your take on that. One thing that I'm looking at here that does seem to raise a couple of question marks, this whole Rockefeller initiative thing. I'd like you to talk about what this is, because as soon as I see the name Rockefeller, I think, oh my God, Illuminati bloodline family, can't trust that. But it seems, according to this Rockefeller guy, Lawrence Rockefeller, he's actually trying to cause there to be UFO disclosure. I mean, could he be a good Rockefeller who might suffer the same fate that JFK suffered for trying to go against his evil masters or something? I'm thinking, sorry for going off the deep end here, but tell us about this Rockefeller initiative, because a lot of people who don't trust the Rockefellers would be quite confused about this.
Well, the Rockefeller initiative, Lawrence Rockefeller's effort to get Clinton to essentially end the truth embargo, which was launched in March of 1993 and lasted 3 years, was a very important event, but the press didn't cover it. There was only one article written about it, period, by Deborah Orrin in the New York Post. That article was then republished by the New York Observer and the Deborah Orrin in the New York Daily News, and then it was republished by the New York Post and the New York Observer. That's it, nothing else. The Rockefeller Initiative may yet be the trigger that brings about disclosure, because the DVD sets that were sent to Congress on November the 5th contain, amongst many things, a 3-hour testimony session about the Rockefeller Initiative, naming names. There were some very important, powerful people that are still very important and very powerful to this day, that knew about the Rockefeller Initiative, or were involved, and in some cases involved with it, for the 3 years that it went on, and never spoken publicly, not a single word, because they don't want the truth embargo to impact their ambitions. And those people include President Clinton, Secretary Hillary Clinton, John Podesta, Leon Panetta, Albert Gore, Bill Richardson. And I assure you, that is a major problem for these people if the press finally decides to jump in. Now, we have all the documents that confirm this. They've been published for 14 years, submitted to the newspaper, ignored. But it's all on the web. That's the beauty of the web. Nothing goes away. And so the Clintons are eventually going to have to face up to the Rockefeller Initiative. And I think that that is the story, the hook that may launch the press in Washington to do their job finally on this issue. And once they launch, it's over. The truth embargo cannot sustain a major press confrontation. Now, the upside for the Clintons, as I've said many times, is that, first of all, if it happens right away, a Democratic president will get the major legacy, which is good for Democrats, and they happen to be Democrats. So, in that sense, it's good. But there's no question that the Rockefeller Initiative, which could have made Clinton the disclosure president, was also important, and they can take a lot of credit for that. In other words, a piece of that legacy is theirs for the taking. So that's a good reason for them to embrace the process that's underway and not fight it. Obviously, if Clinton or his wife were to come forward and make some strong statements, that would be a big deal and probably force Obama to move very quickly. So you can see this is just a glimpse of some of the political dynamics going on here. Lawrence Rockefeller was certainly one of the more avant-garde, not avant-garde, he was one of the more out-of-the-box, he was the out-of-the-box Rockefeller. He was interested in a lot of things. He had his billions, but business was secondary to his interests. And he supported a lot of the research in the ET field, in the contact field, even crop circle research. He was interested in the Monroe Institute and these, again, more esoteric and alternative areas. That doesn't mean that he didn't have another side to him, but I saw him trying to do a lot of positive things. He eventually slipped into dementia, was already slipping into dementia by 1996, and so it was over. And the initiative did not culminate in the release of all the UFO files or President Obama doing. But thanks to the work of Grant Cameron, and I recommend your listeners go to presidentialufo.com, which is the largest compilation of information about the relationship between presidents and ET issue in the world. It also contains most of the Rockefeller Initiative documents. I have about 300 of the key ones on my website. You can find it at paradigmresearchgroup.org. This issue is the Clintons cannot ultimately get away from this, and so that's one of the key components of the Congressional Hearings Initiative underway, and one of the several reasons why we think we're going to get the press into it finally this time around.
Yeah, you definitely want to pressure the press to release the truth more so than the government, because I do emphasize people try to do that, try to put the pressure on the press more so than you do the government, because if the press is forced to reveal the truth, then the government will have no choice but to follow lead. And although it's funny how I do remember in a documentary, a presentation that I don't remember the guy's name, it was on the UFO TV Studios YouTube channel at some conference where they were showing all the presentations, and this was shortly after Obama was elected president in his first term. He said, I think Obama's going to be disclosing a lot more stuff that other presidents before him haven't disclosed. He keeps talking about how he's going to disclose stuff so we could, and not hold back secrets so we could trust him. Well, after a term and a half, we can say that is utter bull crap, and that guy was misled. And, hopefully, if people like you and me keep exposing truth, then Obama will have no choice but to go back to his word that he said when he said we're going to hide secrets and we're going to disclose information. But
let me mention something. Obama's a lame duck president now. He has less than, actually has a little more than 2 years left. And what did he do after he lost the Senate to the Republicans? He did the immigration directive, and now he is essentially completely surprised the Republicans by essentially ending the Cuban embargo. This is a man who I think had a really rough 6 years, had the crap beat out of him, made plenty of mistakes, but he has some time left, and the ET truth issue is fully in his wheelhouse. Now, this is right up to them. he has full authority to make that announcement. He doesn't need the Congress at all. So just pay attention. There's very interesting things going on. And to clarify, my job is to pressure the press to pressure the government by asking the tough questions. And with 67 years of research to draw on, there's a lot of questions they can ask. And once those questions start being asked, it's over. There's just nothing the government, there's no way the government can lie their way out of it. It's not possible. One of the key ways through the embargo has been successful is to create a situation where questions are never asked. If you're not asked anything, you don't have to lie. The government will avoid saying anything about things that happen. I call it the dog that doesn't bark. And so all kinds of things have taken place in the last 60 years that the government should have jumped on, and they should have been public and come forward and said, that's ridiculous, that's a lie, this is not acceptable, but instead they're saying nothing at all. They're saying nothing at all. They minimize the risk of being asked about their statements. That's why when Obama's White House issued the statement on the website on October the 4th, 2011, stating there was no evidence for any of this, it could have been a deliberate maneuver on their part to help the process along. But because by making a statement so obviously false, they gave us a very interesting lever to use with the press. And one of the things I hope to find out post-disclosure is, was that in fact a effort to help the advocates for truth in this thing by producing that kind of statement, that they actually, there was a strategy there, and this just wasn't a denial based upon sheer ignorance. Because they're not that ignorant. There's enough people in the government, in the White House, and the ET presence is real. So it's either a complete lie in service to the national security structure, or it is an intentional maneuver on their part to provide a very interesting lever for the advocates to work with, in which case it was a brilliant strategy. And my hat's off to it. No, I mean, they could have also just said, okay, you got us, and announced the ET presence because of the work back in 2011. I knew they were going to do that. So, again, there's a whole lot of the story and a whole lot of this history that I'm dying to learn more about post-disclosure.
Yeah, I don't want to get off on too much of a tangent about this, but at the same time, I do want people to understand, if you want to ask for your government to help you out and disclose stuff, don't be asking your government to do things they're not supposed to have authority to do. Like I heard you say Obama making law and all. Well, first of all, any executive order that applies outside the executive branch is null and void. The president does not have authority to sign executive orders that apply outside the executive branch. Not only that, the federal government of the United States does not even have authority to pass laws that directly affect the people of the several states. The only authority government has is to exert by any force to protect the rights and property of everyone under the auspices of that government, and that's in conjunction with the 18 enumerated powers of the federal Constitution. That's it. So all these laws that they're signing, Patriot Act, NDAA, those laws are null and void on their face. The government doesn't act like that, but they are null and void right on their face because the government never had authority to sign them in the first place. Yet people can say what they want about how government, if it's tyrannical, will use force to overpower what it doesn't have authority to do. But I want people to understand, don't be asking Obama things like, please sign an executive order to make everyone in the country do so. No. They're not supposed to have authority to do that. People need to understand that. So just want to get that out so people don't ask their government to step outside its bounds. But I do want to get back here to this whole UFO subject about possibly what might some light at the end of the tunnel in the near future. It has been said by some of my past the people I've had on my show, like Ray Kusalandich and such, that many of the bad aliens that are on this planet, be they reptilians, greys, and such, their time is almost up. Their underground bases are being shut down. Like I heard some people have said that earthquake that happened in 2011, which cracked some of the Washington Monument, that earthquake was actually caused by good ETs shooting down rays of energy to destroy the reptilian and gray bases underneath North America. And in like the 2017 timeframe, I mentioned this earlier, we're going to actually see like disclosure with the ETs coming and the good ETs showing us, the bad ETs getting arrested, and people that subscribe to what people like David Icke have talked about, that are leaders, many of them are reptilian aliens masquerading behind the holographic mask of a human. You will actually be able to see them shapeshift more in public, like their disguise will show themselves. You'll see like on TV more often, because in conjunction with Earth's consciousness raising and people waking up, they will not be able to exist on this planet, so their hiding behind the mask is going to be revealed and all that. So that, in the sense, that's disclosure and also light at the end of the tunnel. It's kind of far out there when you're talking about disclosure, but with that being said, do you think maybe there is some truth to this whole thing about the bad aliens' time is almost up on planet Earth?
Well, you mentioned probably a half a dozen or more memes there. All I can say is that I don't have the ability to assess any of it. Again, as I've said before, we're stuck in a swamp of speculations and theories that has been essentially created by the government because of the truth embargo and 6.5 decades of corrupting the whole process of learning, the understanding process. And that's one of the reasons why it's very hard to make any progress. The way I make progress is whatever the assertion, whatever the speculation, I assign a probability to it based upon just what I know and common sense. That's all I can do. I don't have the time to investigate or the funds to investigate every theory that I hear about this subject matter. You spend your whole life doing that. And things that have probabilities that are low, I simply pass by. I'm interested in the stuff that's got probabilities up in the 90% range or more, or certainty. The presence of the ETs is not 90%, it's 100%. So that one's easy to work with. So you've raised a lot of interesting concepts and theories, and all I can say is they're not of a type that I could utilize or do utilize in the advocacy process. But would look forward to seeing these things clarified post-disclosure. I expect, and I've said this many times, that post-disclosure we're going to learn that some things that we thought were absolutely established are not true. It's going to be a shock. And we're going to learn some things that we dismissed as being completely ridiculous are going to be true. And that's going to be a shock. That's okay. That's all right. No big deal. What's important, what is a big deal, is that we learn these things. Right? And that's what is our goal. Not to prove everything in the absence of proper access to information, but to get access and then address these issues. So I am expecting to be surprised by some things in the post-disclosure world, some things that come out, and that'll be fine. Right now, my job is not to prove all the theories or disprove all the theories and speculations that are out there about the history of this phenomenon, what's going on. My job is to see to it the U.S. government, either first or because it has to follow some other nation, acknowledges the core fundamental truth, which is the most important truth in all of this, and that is we're not alone in the universe, and other extraterrestrial, other intelligent entities from elsewhere are engaging us now, and we need to know as much about that as we can, as soon as we can, so that we can all address it and deal with it as a species, as a global civilization, and not be left in the dark and leave it to a few individuals working in deep secrecy to do it for us.
Yeah, and I guess, by the way, it's a shame those callers had to hang up shortly after I mentioned I was going to have them on. They both hung up. I hope it didn't scare them or anything, but it's not very often I get a caller on the show. It doesn't really earn a good time for people to call in. Everybody's either eating dinner or going home from their commute at this time. Most of my listeners are the archive variety, but with that said, I'll make sure I get this interview on YouTube and such and spread it like wildfire so this important information gets out to the public. But speaking of which, information getting out to the public, I mean, do you or do you not agree that information like this to get disclosure to happen at a faster rate, should you force it upon people? Because it has been said by many, don't try to wake up the sheeple. They can't be woken up. Their beliefs are too rigid. They're too paradigmatic. They're too fearful. And they're too stupid. They can't handle the truth, so don't try to harass them to wake them up. But other people would say, no, I mean, you got to try to wake them up. And we all remember that scene in the movie They Live where the guy's friend would not put on the glasses. So Nada, the main character, he fought him to the death to make him put on the glasses. There are some people where they go off the deep end and say, that's what you should do to the sheeple. Make them put on the glasses, force them to do it, because in a sense, those sheeple are, I'm sorry if people find the word sheeple derogatory, but the word just sticks. Is it just like, should we maybe hassle and harass them, in your opinion, to wake them up for the sake of getting us out of this prison planet matrix mess and making disclosure possible? Do you agree or disagree with that?
Well, my job is not to harass people, and I don't, or convince everybody that it's true. It's not necessary, for one thing. The process of understanding this has been underway for 6.5 decades, and already half the people have pretty much figured it out. And of the remaining half, probably half of those are leaning in that direction. So, no, I'm not in that business. As I've said, people will figure it out in their own good time. So when it comes to the citizens, no, I don't want to beat on them and pry their eyes open. Admittedly, if people withdraw sufficiently from the social contract, ultimately the United States will suffer. But the government has been the principal problem, not the people. I mean, they certainly have failed in many ways and have a certain responsibility for the situation that exists now. But, you know, look, the Cold War, the nuclear threat, was terrifying. And people really have no choice but to refer to the government. But there's been consequences from that deferral, and now that has to be fixed. So my job is not to convince 50 more people tomorrow that the ET issue is real. My job is to get the press, the political media in Washington, D.C., to try to find out what's going on and use their position as press and their access as press to ask appropriate people the appropriate questions. That's my job. And that's doable. And we hope to succeed very soon. And I assure you that once the President of the United States announces that there is an extraterrestrial presence, followed by every head of state of every nation in the world, certainly all of the developed world and probably most of the undeveloped world, or less developed world, that plenty of people will open their eyes and glue themselves to their television sets for weeks and months to come, trying to learn and hear as much as they can about this, because this will be the most profound event in human history. So if you feel that the world's people and American people need to wake up, this will be their wake-up call. And I think that they will rise to the occasion.
Yeah, and that raises the question, in regards to geography, could you enlighten us on, at the present moment, which countries, to the best of your knowledge, would be most easy to convince in regards to disclosure? and which would be the hardest. Like, I remember on an episode of Ancient Aliens, the first episode, as a matter of fact, Giorgio Tsoukalos, he said if he was in India, he'd be out of a job because everybody there talks about extraterrestrials and believes that extraterrestrials are real, and that's kind of ironic because here in America, it's supposed to be the land of the free, the home of the brave, and all that, and so they say. But yet, if in this country, if you talk about extraterrestrials, you get dismissed as a lunatic. But as Giorgio said, in India, which is like in many regards a hellhole in regards to the ways of living people have to go through there. Like they say it's very spiritual, but people have said no, it's actually like a hellhole in regards to the living conditions there, and yet people are a lot more accepting of ETs than they are in America. How ironic. Well, that's just two examples, India and America. But at this present moment, which nations on planet Earth are would be the most accepted to disclosure, and which would be the least accepted and the most likely to tune out? And by the way, you got 8 minutes left.
Yeah, no, I don't think it would be receptive. Which are the most likely nations that might disclose ahead of the United States? The two most important candidates are Russia and China. And if I'm the White House, I'd be very concerned about that. If Putin or Xi Jinping were to go first and announce the extraterrestrial presence, it would be a geopolitical disaster for the United States, I'll tell you that. And so the people in the White House need to wake up and think real hard about holding off on this any longer. There are a number of other nations that could disclose. There are about 15 nations that have released huge numbers of files as a way of telling the United States that they're losing patience. This has been going on since 2004. But the UK could do it, Canada could do it, France, even Australia would probably be the first. That would probably trigger it. There are a number of South American countries that are getting deeply involved in this. Brazil, Uruguay, Peru, Argentina, Chile, Mexico. If the head of state of one of those countries were to make an announcement to the people, provide some powerful evidence from their military gun camera footage, from their chase planes, things like that, it might be enough to trigger it. So there are actually a number of countries. The ones I mentioned are, I think, the most likely candidates, but we could be surprised. So the message to the White House is that, look, this is 2014, and the United States is losing prestige all over the world. It's losing financial clout. We're not the only game in town. And the U.S. started this embargo, and if it isn't the first nation to end it, then it's going to get all of the downside without any of the upside, or at least from public relations standpoint. And that's a lose-lose situation for the Obama White House, a lose-lose situation for the country, it's a lose-lose situation for the Pentagon. So the way that we can mitigate the fallout from a U.S.-led, U.S.-orchestrated, and U.S.-maintained truth embargo is to be the nation that ends it. So that's the way I think about it. And you're right. The issue is now increasingly being engaged by other nations, and time is running out for the U.S. to lead on this. I know we don't have a lot of time left, so let me again remind your listeners that there's a Congressional Hearing Initiative underway. They can get involved by sending social media messages, Twitters, and emails to all the members of Congress they want to send to, as often as they want to send to. And that's true not only of U.S. citizens, but anyone in the world. And they can go to faxonwashington.org, FAX on Washington.org. They can go to disclosure.media, or they can go to the Facebook page of the Disclosure Lobby. And there they can get the information and the links that will take them fairly easily to find the Twitter accounts and Facebook accounts for the members of Congress, and they can engage them. They also can get an easy links to all their email form pages, so they can email anybody in the Senate or their district representative in the House of Representatives. We need people to continue to do this all through the end of this month and into January, like about mid-January. That should be enough. Over 600,000 messages plus an uncounted number of many thousands of emails have already been sent. But we've got to keep it up. And so we advise people, you can participate, you can be involved in it. And it doesn't take a lot of effort. I should also mention on January the 7th, we're going to launch the 6th disclosure petition. That is already up at disclosurepetition.org. And by what I mean by launch it, we're going to put it up on the White House website on January the 7th. People will have 30 days to sign it. If we would be fortunate enough to get 100,000 signatures, it's a big number, it would require a response from the White House. So people have about 3 weeks to go to whitehouse.gov, go to We the People, and register with it, sign up with it, because you have to be signed up with it in order to have an account, in other words, in order to sign petitions. We got 3 weeks to do that. So once you're signed up, when the petition goes up, you can sign it in a minute or two, trivial, maybe even less than a minute. Also, we encourage people to spread the word about this. I'm about to send out an update on this to our list. There'll be a press release, of course. So spread the word on social media that to prepare for the petition at the White House website, January the 7th, calling for President Obama to support hearings of the Congress immediately. If we can get a lot of signatures, maybe not 100,000, but 40 or 50,000, it'll generate some press. That'll be useful. But regardless of how many signatures you get, that petition will be up on the White House website for anybody in the world to see for 30 days, from January the 7th to February the 7th. So that's another thing that's about to happen. That's at disclosurepetition.org, and of course the main website for Paradigm Research Group is paradigmresearchgroup.org.
Thanks. And since we have just a couple minutes left, best way to wake people up, someone assert you can't go right to the aliens and the UFOs, they say. You got to start off small. You got to first talk to them about things like how the law is screwed up, and then wake them up to things like conspiracy theories and all. And then after they wake up to that stuff, then you can start moving into the UFO and ET stuff. Do you agree or disagree with that idea? And by the way, you got 2.5 minutes.
People are going to argue and debate this issue. And some of those arguments will go somewhere, most of them won't. We need to continue to develop the alternative press. We need to continue to develop the Internet as a mode of conveying information. We need people to vote again. They're not voting. And we need to see institutional reforms. You don't need everybody on board. You only need about 8-9%, maybe even as low as 7% of a society in order to shift it in a major way. So I encourage people, don't beat up on each other over this. Don't yell and scream at each other because this person doesn't get that or this person doesn't get that. Focus on actions you can take that will improve the process, that will go directly to change. And right now there are some serious things we can do with the government that would help things dramatically. And so I encourage people to focus on that. Just like people of color focused for decades in order to get a Civil Rights Act that would free them from segregation and injustice. And they got that act. People in India wanted the British gone, and they focused on that, and the British left. Women wanted the right to vote. They focused on that, and they got it. Gays want the right to marry, and they focused on that, and they got it. Right now, we need to focus on ending the truth embargo, and if we do, we will end it.
And I have full faith that something is going to happen. They say the government will never disclose it. Well, if we force them to do it, which we have the right to do because we created government, it is our right to force them to expose things that violate our rights and hide truths from us, then they'll be forced to do it. And that's double for the media. But Steve, since we've come to the end of this show, I'm going to tell you the same thing I tell all my guests. But, well, in a sense, this doesn't really apply to you because we're going to have that roundtable discussion, which you're going to be a part in on January 10th. But in general, one of my goals with this show, my show, Nature of Reality Radio, is to get as many different people on the show as possible before I start giving any one specific guest double dips. You are a fascinating individual. Your work is very important and such, but because I am on that mission to get different people on, I will probably not be asking you to come on my show again, but that's only because I need to give lots and lots of other fascinating individuals the opportunity to have some glory on my show. But again, we will have that roundtable discussion on January 10th, and I guess we'll pretty much have no choice but to re-ask some of the questions and bring up some of the subjects that I've discussed in this interview. But hey, I'll try to bring up some new stuff just so that our roundtable discussion will have a feeling of originality to it. But hey, Steve, it was a pleasure having you on. I'll make sure this spreads far and wide. So without further ado, I bid you good day and good luck, and keep working hard.
Thanks, Andrew.
You're welcome. Take care. Later. Well, folks, in regards to the near future, I'm not exactly sure what is going to be coming on with my show in regards to guests. I don't have any guests for the next 2 weeks, Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve. Kind of hard to find guests those days. I'll probably do a show by myself. If I can't get a guest, maybe I'll take a week off, holiday break, but we'll see what happens. So without further ado, namaste. This is Andrew Fisher signing off. So long, everybody.